For years, fans believed they understood the dynamic between Caitríona Balfe and Sam Heughan, professional, respectful, and built on undeniable on-screen chemistry. But what if that version of the story was only part of the truth? Recent resurfaced clips and behind-the-scenes moments have sparked a new theory, one that suggests Caitríona may have been quietly protecting Sam from something far more serious than anyone realized. And the most unsettling part is this: it may have been happening right in front of everyone, hidden in plain sight. Their partnership on Outlander has always been described as close but controlled, a balance that allowed them to maintain both authenticity and distance in the public eye. Interviews often showed them laughing, deflecting personal questions, and reinforcing the idea that their connection was rooted strictly in their work. But over time, certain moments began to stand out, small, almost insignificant at first, yet impossible to ignore once noticed. Subtle interruptions, carefully worded responses, and the way Caitríona would occasionally step in just a fraction too quickly when conversations shifted toward more personal territory. At the time, these moments were easy to dismiss. It could have been professionalism, media training, or simply an effort to keep the focus on the show rather than the personal lives. But now, revisiting those interviews with a different perspective, fans are beginning to see a pattern, one that suggests Caitríona wasn't just maintaining boundaries, but actively redirecting attention. And the question that naturally follows is, why? One particularly telling clip has been circulating again, drawing more attention than it ever did before. During an interview, when Sam was asked a question that seemed to catch him off guard, there was a brief pause, a hesitation that lasted only a second but felt noticeably out of rhythm. Before he could fully respond, Caitríona stepped in, smoothly shifting the conversation in a way that felt almost instinctive. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't obvious, but it was precise, almost like a practiced response. Moments like that began to accumulate, forming a narrative that fans hadn't considered before. There were times when Caitríona appeared unusually composed during situations that might have unsettled others, as if she was already aware of how to handle them. Times when she answered questions directed at Sam, not in a way that overshadowed him, but in a way that subtly guided the direction of the conversation. It wasn't controlling, it was protective. What makes this theory even more compelling is how consistent it seems across different contexts. Whether in press tours, panel discussions, or casual behind-the-scenes footage, there are repeated instances where Caitríona appears to anticipate potential tension before it fully surfaces. She doesn't draw attention to it, doesn't make it obvious, but the timing is always just right, just enough to shift the focus without anyone questioning it in the moment. For years, this dynamic was interpreted as chemistry, as mutual understanding between co-stars who had worked together long enough to read each other effortlessly. And that may still be true, but now, fans are beginning to wonder if there was another layer beneath that connection. One that involved not just collaboration, but a quiet awareness of something that needed to be managed carefully. The most intriguing part is that Caitríona herself has never openly addressed anything like this. She has always maintained a consistent narrative, emphasizing professionalism, friendship, and respect. There have been no dramatic revelations, no hints of hidden tension, nothing that would directly confirm any of these growing theories. And yet, the absence of explanation has only made the speculation stronger. Because when someone consistently steps in at just the right moment, when they seem to know exactly when to redirect, when to soften, when to deflect, it raises the possibility that they're not reacting randomly. They're responding to something specific, something they understand in a way others don't. And that kind of awareness doesn't usually come without a reason. As more fans revisit old footage and piece together these moments, the idea of Caitríona as a quiet protector is gaining traction. Not in a dramatic, headline-grabbing way, but in a subtle, almost invisible role that may have shaped how Sam has been perceived over the years. If true, it would mean that part of his public image wasn't just managed by teams or strategies, but influenced by someone standing right beside him. And now, with these details coming back into focus, one question is becoming harder to ignore. Was Caitríona simply being a supportive co-star, or was she quietly shielding Sam from something the public was never meant to see? As the theory continued to spread, what once seemed like isolated moments began forming a narrative that felt increasingly difficult to ignore. The idea that Caitríona Balfe had been quietly protecting Sam Heughan was no longer just speculation, it started to feel like a missing piece that made everything else suddenly make sense. But the real question wasn't whether she had stepped in during interviews or redirected conversations. It was what exactly she might have been protecting him from. Sources close to the production environment, though never officially confirmed, have long hinted at the intense pressure surrounding Outlander and the expectations placed on its lead actors. The show didn't just demand physical endurance, it required emotional consistency across years of storytelling, constant public appearances, and a level of fan engagement that rarely slows down. Under that kind of pressure, even small missteps can become magnified, especially when every word is being watched, recorded, and analyzed. This is where Caitríona's role begins to take on a different meaning. If Sam had moments of hesitation, fatigue, or even uncertainty during interviews, those seconds could easily have been taken out of context and turned into something much bigger. In a media environment that thrives on headlines, a single awkward answer can spiral into speculation about personal struggles, professional issues, or behind-the-scenes tension. And if Caitríona recognized those moments before they fully unfolded, her instinct to step in may not have been accidental, it may have been intentional. There's also the possibility that what she was protecting wasn't a single incident, but a pattern, something ongoing that required careful handling over time. Not something dramatic enough to make headlines on its own, but significant enough that it needed to be managed consistently. That would explain the precision of her timing, the way she seemed to anticipate shifts in conversation before they became uncomfortable. It wasn't about controlling the narrative, it was about keeping it stable. What makes this even more complex is how seamlessly it blended into the public dynamic. To most viewers, their interactions felt natural, even effortless, reinforcing the idea that they simply understood each other well. But if there was an added layer of awareness behind that connection, it changes how those moments are perceived. It suggests that their chemistry wasn't just built on performance or friendship, but also on trust that one of them would step in when needed, without drawing attention to it. Fans have also pointed out that this protective dynamic seemed to flow in one direction more often than not. While Sam has always supported Caitríona publicly, the subtle redirections, the careful deflections, and the quick shifts in tone seem to come primarily from her. That asymmetry, while easy to overlook before, now feels more intentional in hindsight. And it raises a question that hasn't been fully answered: did she take on that role by choice, or because she felt it was necessary? Of course, without direct confirmation, all of this remains interpretation. Neither Caitríona nor Sam has publicly addressed anything that would validate or deny these theories. Their narrative has remained consistent, professional, respectful, and grounded in mutual support. But sometimes, what isn't said can carry just as much weight as what is. And in this case, the silence has only made the story more compelling. Because if there really was something being quietly managed behind the scenes, then what the public saw was only part of a much more complex reality. Not a scandal, not a dramatic secret waiting to explode, but something subtler, something human. The kind of situation that doesn't fit neatly into headlines, but still shapes how people show up, how they speak, and how they protect each other in ways that often go unnoticed. Now, the narrative sits in that uncertain space between theory and truth. Maybe Caitríona was simply being a thoughtful, attentive co-star who understood the rhythm of interviews better than most. Or maybe she was doing something more, something intentional, something protective.